Hey everyone, welcome back. Welcome to another exciting video. And in this video, we are going to master the concept of authorization. So authorization can be really hard when your application grows because there are a lot of authorization patterns. There are relationship-based authorization, there's access-based authorization, there is granular level authorization. So in this particular video, I'm going to introduce you to an open source solution known as OpenFGA, which makes these authorization patterns really easy. This OpenFGA we have recently used in one of our projects, and trust me, the authorization implementation using OpenFGA is really easy and it's really scalable. So this OpenFGA is actually built on the concept of Google's Zanzibar white paper. So don't worry, we will discuss about that, what is this white paper, and you will understand how you can have a granular level, or also known as fine access control, in your application. So in this video, we are going to understand what is OpenFGA, how can you use OpenFGA in a Node.js application, and the concepts of OpenFGA. So with that, let's start with the video. All right, so OpenFGA. So OpenFGA is actually an open source relationship-based access control made fast, scalable, and easy to use. So first, before jumping into the OpenFGA ecosystem, let's try to understand the problem. Okay, have you ever used Google's Drive? I mean, of course, you all have used Google Drive, or maybe you have used GitHub. So you know that when you use applications like Google Drive or GitHub, there is a problem, right? What is the problem? That actually they allow you to share these resources with other people. For example, in Google Drive, what you can do is you can create folders, right? You can create multiple folders. And in every folder, you can actually have multiple files. So for example, these are your two files in this folder. Similarly, you can have one more folder which has bunch of files. And now what you can do is magically, you can either choose to share individual files with other users. So let's say you have a lot of users on your platform. So you can either share individual files, or you can even share a full parent folder, which allows this particular user to access all the files in this particular parent. So that means even in future, if you're going to add new files to the same folder, this user automatically has access because he has access to the parent object. This is a really nice implementation. Similarly, in GitHub, you have a concept of repositories, right? You create multiple repositories on GitHub. So first of all, I can add you as a contributor or a maintainer or a writer to my specific repository, or I can basically add you to my GitHub organization as an admin, which gives you access to all the repositories. And even then, inside a single repository, I can give you an access like read only access. Okay, read only access, or I can just give you a maintain only access. Similarly, in the folder, I can just give you a view only access, or I can give you a write only access, or even it can be a mix. I can say that, hey, on this folder, you have a view only access, but for this specific file, I want to give you a write access as well. So these kind of authorization patterns where you have really fine grained control, that is where the application logic really gets complex, and that is where the product like OpenFGA comes into the play. So OpenFGA is actually built on the Google Zanzibar. So it is basically built on the learnings. It is inspired by Google Zanzibar, which is basically a white paper from Google. I'll just tell you what it is. And then it is completely open source. So this is the repository of OpenFGA. So do give it a star if you like it. So let me just tell you what is Google Zanzibar. Okay. So Google internally, to implement the authorization on scale, for example, in their Google Docs, in Google Drive, so they have implemented Google Zanzibar. So Google Zanzibar is the authorization brain in Google, and what it allows you is to basically control these, relationship mappings using a concept known as tuples. So Google Zanzibar is actually the brain behind Google's authorization. Now this OpenFGA, which is completely open source, is inspired from the same white paper, that is Google Zanzibar, and it is an open source version of the Google Zanzibar white paper. Okay, so the overall concept is something known as tuples. So everything is basically a tuple. So the flow is very simple, that as a developer, you define a model, like what all relations you have. Like for example, in case of GitHub, you have a repository, you have an organization, you can add a user to a repository as an admin. So these are your relations. Don't worry, I'll give you a practical overview. And you can create tuples. You can basically tell OpenFGA that this user has this kind of access to this particular object. And then you can ask OpenFGA that if this user is allowed to perform an action or not. So this is the whole brain, the whole ideology behind the OpenFGA. So OpenFGA is fully open source. So this is the GitHub repository of OpenFGA. So do give it a star if you like OpenFGA. Okay. So now let's jump onto the implementation part and little bit understanding part. So what happens in OpenFGA is, number one, you have a concept of store. Now store is basically what that whenever you design an application, you want to store some data. You want to store a mapping that which user has access to which thing. So that all thing is basically scoped to a store. So number one thing that we are going to do in our OpenFGA is that we are going to first create a store. Okay, it's very easy. I'll show you how you can create a store. Inside the store, we are going to first create a model. Okay, what is this model? Model is basically telling the OpenFGA that what my schema, what my relationships are going to look. For example, if we have to design a model for, let us say, Google Drive. Okay, let's say Google Drive. So you will tell OpenFGA that, hey, I have a type user. Okay, that there is a type user. Then there is actually a type folder. You have to tell it. On a folder, you can basically define some relations. For example, let's define a relation. So what all can happen inside a folder? I can add a user as a viewer, right? As a viewer. So a user can basically be a viewer of a folder. Okay, that is really nice. Then you can add more relations. For example, I can say I can also add a user as an editor. Okay, OpenFGA will say, okay, I'm just noting it down. Then you can also have a relation of, let's say, admin maybe. Okay, you can have an admin relation if you want, and you can say that, okay, this is also a user. Then what you can do is you can basically create a type file. So in Google Drive, you can basically have types, you can have files and folders. So even for the file, you can define some relations such as, hey, I want to define a relation. Similarly, on a file also, I can add someone a viewer and I can add someone an editor. So kind of same relations. But this is where something really gets interesting, that you can even define something known as that there can be a parent folder. Let's name it as parent, which is a folder. Nice, which is a folder. And now in OpenFGA, I can even define something known as, hey, I want to give you a relation who can view this particular file. I'll say either that particular user is a viewer. Okay, I can just say either that particular user is a viewer of this file, or he is a viewer. Okay, let's say he is a viewer from parent. Now this is where the things really get interesting. So do you see this particular thing? This, if you just notice, if you just highlight on this particular condition, it says who can view this particular file is basically either he is a direct viewer. So this viewer is basically coming from here, that okay, you are a direct viewer of the file. I go into a Google Drive file and I give you a view access, or you have a view permission from the parent. So parent is basically a folder. So maybe I have added you a viewer in the parent. So this also gives you a inherit permission to view this particular file. So this is where the things really get interesting. So what is a model? I'll show you the models in depth. I'll show you more examples, but model is basically telling what your structure, what your relations look like to OpenFGA. So that is your model. Okay, so as a developer, as a owner of the application, you are going to define models. Then inside the application, you have something known as tuples. Tuples is basically the actual data that stores the mapping. For example, let's say there is a user Piyush who has a view access to a folder name as nodejs. So a tuple will look something like, hey, there is a user Piyush, okay, and he has a viewer access to folder. Which folder? Let's say there is a folder name as node.js. So this is a tuple. This is basically a mapping stored into the OpenFGA as a tuple, which is the actual data. Similarly, I can create one more tuple. Okay, you can create a lot of tuples. I can create a tuple that, hey, listen here, that there is a folder. Which folder? Node.js, and this particular is a parent of a file. So let's say you have a file that is introduction to PDF. Okay, so now these two tuples are basically telling the OpenFGA that Piyush has a view access in a folder Node.js, and Node.js folder is the parent of a file that is intro.pdf. let's say PDF. Okay. Now what will happen is you can perform a check. So I can check, hey, Piyush, technically user Piyush, do you have a view access on file intro.pdf? So whenever you perform a check with OpenFGA, this is basically known as checking. So OpenFGA will say, oh, you are trying to search for user Piyush as a view in file intro. So first of all, who can view? Okay, if you see who can basically view, a viewer. Am I a viewer in this file? The answer is no, because I'm not a direct viewer. But there is an or condition. Or condition says viewer from parent. Oh, okay. Who is the parent of this file? I can see folder node.js. So hey folder node.js, do you have a viewer Piyush? This will return true. So that means yes, I do have a can view access on this particular file. So this is how the overall OpenFGA implementation works. So you define a model, great. You store the tuples and then you perform a check. That is the whole ideology behind the OpenFGA. Now this all complex relationships like, having OR conditions, having these tuples, having this policy, this all is managed by the OpenFGA. They do all the traversal and returns you true or false, whether you have the access or not. All right, so now with this, let me show you a playground from OpenFGA team. So actually there is a public version of this OpenFGA Playground. So this is where you can visualize things. So the URL is play.fga.dev. Okay, so don't worry, you will get all the links. So let me just show you one example. Okay, so you can see this is where you define your model. These are some of your test tuples and this is a diagram, a visualization for you. So you have a couple of examples. Let's first see the Google Drive, okay, because this is something we have already taken an example. So I think this will be very easy for you to understand. So if you see this particular, model, you have a type user. Let me just zoom in a little bit for you, okay? So you have this particular type as user, which is great. Then you have a group member. So who can be a member of a group? That is a user. Now main thing starts here. You have a type folder. I hope you can see these things clearly. You have a type folder and you have owner, like you have a owner of a folder. You can have a parent. So technically a folder can also have a folder, right? A folder inside a folder. And who can be a viewer? Now this is the main thing. Any user who is directly added, number one, or a user who is a member of a group, or owner, because owner also have a view access, or viewer from parent. This is the main thing. Who can view this folder? Anyone who has a view access from the parent. Okay, nice. Now you can see we even have a type of document. This is basically a file. So you can have defined. So you have owner, parent and viewer. So these are your direct access. Like for example, you can directly add an owner to a file. You can directly add a parent to a file. But see these things. Who can write? Owner can write, yes. Or if he is the owner of the parent. Parent is basically a folder. Who can share this file? Owner can share, or who is the owner of the parent? Who can read? Who is a viewer? Okay, technically who is a viewer, or who is the owner, or who has a view access from the parent, which is a folder. And similarly, who can change the owner? Only the owner. So this is how you basically create a scheme model. Okay, so this is, you get a visualization here. So you can just see this visualization that, okay, there is a folder, owner can create a folder. Owner is also a viewer. That is nice. And there is a parent. Okay, parent is basically a folder. So parent is a folder. You can have group, you can have members. Then this is the nice one. So document, owner. Okay, parent is there, change. So what owner can do? Owner can basically change the owner, can share, can read, can write. He cannot read directly because there is a relation of a viewer. Okay, so you can see this is basically a visualization that is shown to you. Now let's look at tuples. So you can see there are some tuples already seeded for me. So there is a folder product 2021 is the parent of this particular document. Okay, user Beth is a viewer of this particular document. Okay, folder, this particular folder is a parent of this thing. So you know what I can do is I can basically check that if this particular user has a view access to this particular document. How? I can do a query. So I can just write a query that is, okay, user Beth, okay, user Beth, Beth related to, let's say, some document, okay, some document as can change owner, you will get some true or false. So if I run this particular query, you can see it is not, right? User Beth to this particular thing. Or if I say, hey, Do he has a can view access? Let's see. A can view. It's basically can read, not a can view. Sorry, my bad. So can read. And yes, that particular user can read. So you can see we got a green, and even we got a whole tree that how he got the access. Like maybe he has access to a parent which also has access to a parent, that is how he got the access. So we also get the full path that how he got the access. Green means yes, we have a access. So this is basically the basics of how OpenFGA works. So you have model, okay, you have tuples. Let me show you one more example of GitHub. Okay, now this is some example that you will try to understand on your own, but it's very easy. Okay, so type user, you have team. Team can have members, basically user are the members. Okay, now a repository. You can add a user as an admin, or if he's a repository admin from owner. Owner is basically an organization. So technically, who is an admin in a repo? If he's an admin of the parent organization, he's an admin in the repo, or I can add someone as an admin to a repo. Similarly, you have maintainer, okay, you have owner, you have this thing. So these are your, actions, your relations on a repository. Similarly, on an organization, I can invite a member. Owner is also a member. I can invite an owner, repo admin, repo reader, and repo writer. So this is basically how you define relations, and this is the visualization here. Okay, nice. I know this is already feeling really nice. Now let's jump on to some implementation. Okay. Right now, I have actually made a sample application for you guys. Now, let me just show you what is this application. This is a Node.js application, very minimal application, simple routes. You can see we have a route to get all the files. So you can just assume that we are trying to make a mini, Google Drive kind of a thing where we want to play around the files. Okay. So you can see basically you can get all the files. You can share a file with someone. Now this is where we throw an error that sorry, we do not have this feature yet, because this is something we need to implement using the OpenFGA, right? You have a create file, so you can just give me a file name and an ID. If it is an existing file, I'll throw an error, else I'll create a record in the database and I'll return you the error. I'll return you the success response. And then you have a simple sign up, this thing, okay, sign up route. Now let me show you what right now is happening in this particular application. So pnpm, and I'll just do a dev. So right now, if I go back, you can see this is my postman. Let's try to fetch all the files. So if I do a send, you can see I have two files. Correct? I have two files. Nice. I can even create more files. So let's say if I create a ID file 3, now this particular file is maybe openfga.pdf file. Send, you can see, okay, I am able to create new files, right? Now I have 3 files. Similarly, share file is something that is not as of now working, and this is our sign up route where I have to give a username and email, and in return I get a token. Nice. Okay, so right now you have seen we have couple of files. Similar thing I also have here. So this, just remember one thing, this user is actually Piyush. Okay, this postman interface is a user whose name is Piyush Garg, and I have one more client which is this particular user. This username is VS Code user. So this is technically a different user, okay, inside the VS Code. Now, if I try to get all the files, you can see we are getting please login. So let's just quickly generate a token for us. Okay, send. So yes, I got a token. I'll just quickly copy this particular token, get all files, authorization, bearer, paste the token and send. So you can see in reality now I'm getting all the files, which is a wrong thing. So ideally what should happen is that whosoever is creating a file, by default only he should see his own files. Similarly, I want to share the files, right? So right now there is no authorization. Everything is shared with everyone. So let's start by integrating OpenFGA. Let's start by, downloading, setting up the infrastructure and everything. So OpenFGA, actually being open source, it gives you a really, really nice Docker Compose support. So one is either you can directly use Docker. So you have Docker pull and you have this run command, or what you can do is you can use Docker Compose. This is what I prefer. So there is a Docker Compose file here. So I'll just quickly copy this Docker Compose file. I'll go here and then let me just create a Docker Compose file here. So I'll just say docker-compose.yml. Okay. So this Docker Compose file, let me just show you what all things does OpenFGA need. There is a Postgres server running, that is nice, on 5432. There is a migrate service running, that is also great. And then there is this OpenFGA running, which is exposing 8080, 8081, and there is a playground for you. Nice. So what I am going to do is, please make sure that your Docker is up and running. So you have to run a command, that is docker compose up -t and enter. So now you will notice it is going to pull all the images and everything, and my OpenFGA server will be up and running on these ports. Okay. All right. So let's wait for a while. Great. So you can see all the containers are up and running. So if I just do a docker ps, you can see all the containers are up and running. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly go on to the 3000 port. That is where my UI is running. Yeah, the playground. So you can see that this is a localhost version. So let's wait for a while. Yeah, so this is my localhost version. So first of all thing. All right. So first thing that we have to create a store. Okay. So file app, I'll just name it a file app create. Now you can see my local store is up and running. So here is a small tutorial for me, which you can basically skip also. So right now, what we have to do is, number one, we have to define a schema. We have to define a model. Okay. So what we have to do is, see, I need this thing. That is okay. You can just leave it as a default one. Let me just zoom in a little bit. So what is my model going to look like is, this is fine. Type user is okay. I don't need the group. Okay. I don't have a feature of group and I don't need a folder. What I'm going to have is, I'm directly going to have something known as file. Okay. On a file, I'm going to have a relation, that is, let's say, if you have access or not. Let's do it directly as a viewer. Okay. So let's say everyone is a viewer. So I'll just say viewer. Okay. So who can be a viewer? A user is basically a viewer. Similarly, I'll also have an owner. Who is the owner? Technically also a user. Then I'll have a defined can view. Who can view this file? Either you are a viewer, of course, you are a viewer, or you are an owner. Basically, you can view this particular file. Similarly, I can have define can edit. Okay, who can edit this file? Only and only the owner. Now here is a magical thing. You know what I can do is, I can say anyone who has edit access technically also has a view access. So if he can edit, he can also view. Okay. So this is our relation and save. That is it. Pretty simple relations. Nice. Pretty simple model. Now let's do one thing. Let's try to create some tuples. Okay. Then we will see how to integrate this in Node.js. This is for the testing purpose. So what I'll say is, I'll just say that, hey, there is a user whose name is Piyush. Okay, that's nice. He is actually an owner of a file that is node.js. Make sense? All cool? Okay. So let's just quickly save this tuple. So you can see I have one tuple. Okay. Now let's say that there is one more user. Let's say user. This user is John. Okay. He has an owner. He's a owner of different file. So let's say there is a github.pdf file. Okay. He's a owner of different file. So I'll just say that, there is a file. Uh, there is a file that is github.pdf. So let's name it as github.pdf, owner of this thing, save. So right now you can see that, John is owner of GitHub file and Piyush is the owner of Node.js file. Now let's try to query something. I'll say is, okay, let me just zoom in, is user Piyush related to file Node.js as a viewer? Okay, not as a viewer. I'm not a viewer, actually can view. Okay. Can I view the file? Yes, I can view the file. Can I edit the file? Yes, I can edit the file. Am I an owner? Let's see. Yes, I am the owner. But if I say can edit, okay, can edit. Can Piyush edit github.pdf? That's the question. Can Piyush edit github.pdf? No. Okay, I cannot edit it. Makes sense, makes sense, makes sense. Can I view it? No, I cannot view it because the tuple does not exist. Now let's just do one thing now. Let's create a tuple that is user Piyush. Hey Piyush, now you are a viewer in which file? There was a file, right? github.pdf. .pdf and save it. Nice. Now, if I rerun the query, oh, I can view the GitHub file. You can see it. But can I edit this particular file? No. But can I view it? Yeah, I can view it. But can John view it? Yes, it can view. He can view it. Can he edit it? Oh, yes, he can edit it. But Piyush cannot edit this particular file. So this is basically how you perform a check. So technically our model is up and running. You can see, okay, so if I go back, you can see our model is all up and running. These tuples will be created by our Node.js server. So let's just do one thing. Let's quickly set up the SDK and get our server up and working. So OpenFGA JS is here. Let me just click on here. So this is the JavaScript SDK for OpenFGA. So installation is where, yeah, here is the installation. So you have to install this thing. So Control C, and I am using pnpm. So I'll just say pnpm install this particular package. Okay. So if I go into my package.json, what you're going to notice is I have this particular package here. Nice. Now what we have to do is we have to initialize the OpenFGA client. So this is how it basically goes. So I'll just copy this particular code from here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, that is OpenFGA.js file. So I'm just pasting it here, and we can just convert this particular thing to import statement actually. So I'll just say, yeah, so there is an import syntax. So I'll just copy and paste it. So here we need few things, right? We need few things, that is API URL, we need the store ID, and we need the authorization model ID. API URL is basically simple. We will just say http:// localhost, because OpenFGA server is running on localhost. On which port it is running? It is basically running on 8080. So I'll just say 8080. Nice. Store ID. How will you get the store ID? Just go back to your UI. This is the UI that where we were playing. And here on the top corner, copy the store ID. Okay. So let me just do it again. Store ID has been copied. So this is basically my store ID. And you also have to copy the model ID, this model ID. So let me just copy the latest authorization model ID, copy, and we can just do a paste here. That's it. So we got our store, we got our model. I hope these two are different. Yeah. Now using this FGA client, we can interact with the server. So guys, you tell me what we have to do. Okay. Technically, you have to write a tuple, you have to check for a tuple. That's basically what we have to do. So if I go back to my index.js file, what you will notice is that whenever someone creates a file, technically after creating that file, I should create a tuple here. Technically, whenever a user creates a file, okay, I need to create a tuple. What kind of tuple do I want to create? I want to say that the current user, whosoever is creating the file, is basically the owner of this particular file. This is the tuple I want to create. So how can we create a tuple using OpenFGA client? Let's see the documentation. So just search for write relationship tuples. So you can just say FGA client dot write tuples, or you can just say write, and then this is how you basically pass a tuple. So I'm just going to say, okay, await. We need to import the OpenFGA client that we just made. Import something from dot slash OpenFGA.js and import the OpenFGA client. Okay. Now, going back here, await FGA client dot write. Okay. I want to do some writes. Okay. I want to create a single tuple. What? I'll just say, hey, there is a user. There is a user. Let's take the current user's username. So I already have the access to the username. So this is the current logged in user's username. Relation, I'll say owner. Why owner? Because if you see on my UI, where is my UI? There is a owner relation, right? This is the relation I want, owner. So I'm basically making him owner. Of which object? Of which object? The file. So this object is going to be basically file. Let me just hit a save, colon, whatsoever is the ID of this particular file. So technically this is the file ID, and save. That is it. That's it. So this is how you create an owner inside the FGA client. So you are basically telling the OpenFGA that, hey, this user name is the owner of the file. In reality, you will replace this with the ID in the database. So right now I don't have any ID because I'm not storing users in the database. But okay, I have the username, so I'll just keep it like this. Nice. Okay. Now, what happens when you create a file? You basically add a model. You basically tell OpenFGA. So technically, now when you are listing the files, first I am going to ask the OpenFGA that, hey, for this particular user, tell me which all files he is allowed. So I have to do a list. Ask the OpenFGA, right? So what I can do is, if I go back here, if I go into the documentation, there is something known as list objects. Exactly this. So what you can say is, you can basically say that, hey, Mr. FGA client dot list objects. Okay, really nice. For which for which particular user you want to list the objects. I'll just say, hey, for this particular user, that is request.user.username. What kind of objects do you want to list? I want to list wherever he has a relation of can view. Technically, we are adding him as a owner, but can view access is basically coming from here. So if he's a viewer or can edit, basically inherited. Okay, nice. And do we have to pass anything? Yeah. So we need all the files. So type is basically the file. And anything else do we need? No, there is nothing else needed. So what this is going to give me is, this is going to actually give me all the objects, sorry, const the allowed files equals to await this thing. Now what I can do is, if I see there is something known as objects, and I can basically map over the objects. So I'll just do one thing. I'll just say map for every object. I just want to do for every object. I'll just do a console.log as of now. Console.log object, and I'll just say object dot. So let's just see the response. So this is what you're going to get as a response. Document colon the ID, right? You can see here. So response dot object is basically, this is what you're going to get. So this object is basically what? A single object. So I'll just hit the save. So you can see, let's just do a pnpm def. Okay, so let's just see what happens in the console. So clear the logs. If I try to fetch everything right now, you can see we are getting an empty array. Okay, so yeah, so see, we are not getting anything. Let me create a new file. Just remember guys, I'm creating a new file for, I'll name it as OpenFGA-Piyush Garg def. This is the file. Okay, send. Nice. Now if I try to fetch, oh, I'm getting an object. Can you see that? File colon file4. So that means what I can basically do is, I can basically return something known as object. I can split this by the colon because I want to get rid of this file thing, and I can return the one. So this will give me all the allowed file IDs. You get it now? Now what I can do, I don't want to return all the files. I want to put a filter. So I'll just say files dot filter, where e.id, the file ID, is basically inside the allows file ID. So allows file IDs dot includes this particular thing. So this is only going to give me the allowed files. In reality, you will have a SQL query like select star from files, where file ID in this array. Okay, but okay, I don't have this thing. So I'll just say allowed. Okay, I'm just taking the allowed, and I'll only return you the files which you are allowed to view. Nice. So now if I list my files, I am actually getting only one file. Okay. Okay, that's really nice. And if I go into this particular client, which is a different user, and I send, okay, and I send a request, I don't get anything because this user has access to no file. Okay, let me create a file from here. So this user is going to create a file, let's say 9, and this is a node.js file, and send. Oh, it is getting unauthorized because I forgot to paste the token. So let me just copy the token real quick, and authorization bearer token send. File created. Nice. What was the ID of the file? If you just forget, file 9. Now if this user gets the file, he is getting only file 9. But whereas this user is only getting file 4 because you have authorized the scope. Maybe I want to share the file 4 with this user. I want to share the file 4 with this user. So what I basically want to do is, I want to copy this particular ID, and I want to share the file 4. See, I want to share my file number 4 with which user? Let me just grab the username. So what is the username of this user? That is vscode-user. Okay. So right now this particular route is not implemented. You can see we are getting an error. So what I can do, let's go back to our server file, that is index.js. What we have to do, we have to just write a tuple. We have to just write a tuple. So let me just borrow this code, that is writing a tuple. So because you are giving access to someone right here, so technically I don't want to give him an owner access. I'll just give him a viewer access. You can even get this thing from the front end as a viewer access. That's it. And let's make it async. That is it. Oh, by the way, here is a thing. You don't want to give access to this user. You want to actually give the access to this user, and save it. Your server is restarted. Now, as of now, this user has access to only file 4. Nice. This user has access to how many files? Let me just do a send. So if you see, Only file 9, right? You can see only file 9. Let's share the file 4 with that user. Send. So what is the response I'm getting? Uh, Not sure what response I got. But now if I list the files, okay, it seems something, where is the response gone? Okay, it seems like we have made some silly mistake. That's okay. Oh, I forgot to change this, by the way. So it should be now 200, and I should actually say message access added, right? So this is basically what we should add here. Access added. So let me just quickly go through it. We are basically creating a username. Relation is viewer. Let me just check if it was a viewer only, right? Yes, it was a viewer. So viewer to this particular file with this particular ID. So everything seems good. Okay. So let me just restart the server. So yes, the server is restarted. So I'm basically trying to share file number 4 with this particular username. And let me just now do a send. Access added. Now when this user comes and he makes a send request, oh, I have access to 2 files. But whereas this user has access to only 1 file. So this is basically what is maintained by the OpenFGA. Okay, so if I go into my OpenFGA, so this is our model. This is basically how it is maintained, and you can even see the tuples getting created. So you can see all the tuples that we have just created. Nice. So this is how you use OpenFGA in production. This is how it makes your life easy. So this was the whole background around the OpenFGA, that how you can create tuples, how you can create models, and whenever you have to change a pattern. For example, maybe you don't want to give a view access by default, you just have to change the model. That's it. Your tuples can remain there. So this was the beginner guide to how to use OpenFGA and implement an authorization, fine-grained authorization using OpenFGA. By the way, there is also an hosted version of OpenFGA given by the Auth0. So you can even check out that if you don't want to self-host the OpenFGA. And don't forget to star the OpenFGA repository. All the links are given in the description below. So with that, let's end the video. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, do hit the subscribe button. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's meet you in the next one. Until then, bye bye and take care.